My sister didn't introduce me that night, she introduced my dog. I was still 3 steps from the patio when I heard it, her voice light and polished, carrying just enough to pull attention without sounding like she was trying. And this, Chelsea said, giving the leash a small, elegant flick of her wrist, is our new security detail. Laughter, admiration, a few impressed whistles. Someone asked what breed he was. Someone else asked how much he cost. Another guest leaned in, half joking. That thing looks like it could take down a grown man. Chelsea smiled like she'd earned it. And my father, standing just behind her with a glass of bourbon in his hand, didn't correct her. He didn't even hesitate. He just nodded once, slow and satisfied, like everything was exactly where it belonged. I stopped walking. Not because I was surprised, not because I was angry, because in that moment something shifted, quiet and precise, the way it always does before people make a mistake they don't understand yet. Titan didn't look at her. That was the first thing I noticed. He stood beside Chelsea, leash held too loosely in her manicured hand, posture rigid, but controlled, ears forward, not toward the crowd, not toward the noise, not toward her. Toward something else. Or someone. Me. His eyes locked onto mine from across the patio, steady, unblinking, waiting. Good. At least one of us still understood the situation. The smell of grilled steak hung thick in the air, mixing with expensive perfume, and something faintly artificial, like everything about this place had been curated to look effortless. String lights stretched across the backyard, casting a warm glow over polished stone and perfectly arranged furniture. Champagne flutes clinked softly as people moved through the space, smiling, performing, pretending. Chelsea thrived in places like this. She always had. If something could be displayed, she would display it. If something looked valuable, she would claim it. Growing up, it had been smaller things, my clothes, my books, my friends. Later, it was bigger, my time, my space, my silence. Now it was my dog. Or at least that's what everyone here thought. I stepped forward again, slow, measured, not rushing to correct anything. Not yet. "Where'd you get him?" a man in a tailored navy suit asked, crouching slightly to get a closer look at Titan. Chelsea didn't miss a beat. "We just brought him in," she said smoothly. "Private training. Top tier," Bradley insisted. Bradley, her husband, stood a few feet away, nodding like he'd been part of the decision from the start. He didn't look at me when I approached. He didn't need to. People like him rarely look at what they think they've already assessed. "That's a Belgian Malinois, right?" another guest added. "Yeah," Bradley answered this time, stepping in, voice confident. "Best there is." Titan didn't react. No tail wag, no curiosity, no engagement. Just that same stillness, that same focus. On me. I reached the edge of the group and stopped just outside the circle of attention, close enough to see the details, far enough to stay out of the performance. Chelsea saw me then. Of course she did. Her smile didn't fade, it sharpened. "Oh," she said, turning slightly, angling her body so Titan was fully visible between us, "you made it." Not "I'm glad you're here," not "come join us." Just acknowledgement, controlled, measured. Possessive. My father followed her gaze and finally looked at me. His expression didn't change much. It never did. Years of command had carved that into him, calm, unreadable, authoritative. Even retired, he carried it like a second skin. "You're late," he said. I glanced at my watch, then back at him. "I'm on time." He didn't argue. He just took a slow sip of his drink and looked away like the distinction didn't matter. It didn't, not to him. Control wasn't about being right. It was about being unquestioned. Chelsea shifted her grip on the leash, drawing Titan slightly closer to her side like she was adjusting a piece of jewelry. "Everyone's been asking about him," she continued, voice light, almost playful. "He's been a hit." I let my gaze drop briefly to her hand on the leather, then back to her face. "He usually is," I said. A few people in the group exchanged glances, sensing something just beneath the surface but not quite understanding it. That tension, the one that sits right between polite conversation and something sharper, that's where curiosity lives. Chelsea smiled wider, but there was a flicker behind it now. "Well," she said, giving the leash another small tug, "he's in better hands now." Titan didn't move. Not even a shift of weight. Her fingers tightened slightly, subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice. I did. So did he. "Sit," she said softly, like she was testing him. "Nothing." She laughed, a short, dismissive sound. Still adjusting, she added quickly, glancing around for reassurance. "New environment." Bradley nodded. "He'll get there." I said nothing. Didn't correct them, didn't step in. Because Titan wasn't confused. He wasn't adjusting. He was holding. There's a difference, and only one of us in that space understood it. I moved past the group without another word, heading toward the drink table near the far end of the patio. The conversation behind me picked back up slightly louder than before, like people were trying to smooth over something they couldn't quite name. Ice clinked as I picked up a glass. I didn't drink it right away. Instead, I turned just enough to keep Titan in my peripheral vision. That's when I saw it. Not the leash, not Chelsea. The direction of his focus. He wasn't just looking at me anymore. His gaze shifted briefly precisely past me. Toward the house. More specifically, toward the lower level. I followed the line without turning my head too obviously. The sliding glass doors were open, leading into the main living area. Beyond that, a hallway. And at the far end of that hallway, partially obscured by a decorative console table and a strategically placed piece of art, a door. Plain, solid, closed. It didn't match the rest of the house. Everything else was open, concept, glass, light, visibility. This door was different, reinforced, intentional. Hidden but not enough. Titan's ears twitched. Once. Subtle. Then his attention snapped back to me like he'd checked something and confirmed it. My fingers tightened slightly around the glass. Not emotion. Recognition. Patterns don't lie. Training doesn't improvise. If he was marking something, there was a reason. Behind me, Chelsea's voice rose again, louder now, pulling attention back to her. We're thinking of installing additional cameras, she was saying, just to match him. A few people laughed. My father chuckled under his breath. Satisfied. Of course he was. From his perspective, everything made sense. His older daughter successful, visible, in control. His younger one quiet, distant, difficult, finally stepping back. Order restored. That's what he believed. I took a slow sip of my drink, letting the cold settle before I set the glass down. Titan looked at the door again. Not curious. Not distracted. Focused. Waiting. I exhaled once steady. That basement door, I said under my breath, just loud enough for myself. Then I stopped. Because in that moment, I understood something they didn't. This wasn't about a dog, and it definitely wasn't over. I didn't confront Chelsea that night. That was what she wanted. She wanted me to cross the patio, take the leash back, make a scene in front of her guests so she could tilt her head, lower her voice, and turn me into the problem. Chelsea had always been strongest inside chaos. She didn't have to clean up. She knew how to bait emotion, how to let it bloom in public, and how to stand just far enough from the mess to look innocent when it landed. So I didn't give her that. Instead, I watched. The house was too bright inside. Every surface reflected something light, glass-polished stone people who looked like they'd dressed for each other rather than for the evening. Music drifted through hidden speakers, low enough to sound expensive. Somewhere in the kitchen, silverware clicked against serving trays. Someone laughed too loudly near the dining room entrance, and the sound carried farther than it should have. I moved through it all without urgency, one hand in my pocket, the other loose at my side. Not drifting, tracking. Titan stayed near Chelsea for appearances, but the pattern was already obvious. Every few minutes, no matter who approached him, no matter what Chelsea said, no matter how many times Bradley placed a hand on his back like he was trying to claim ownership through touch, Titan's attention returned to the same place. The basement door. Not the hallway in general, not the lower level, the door itself. He would hold for a few seconds, scan the room, then settle again, ears forward, posture, tight eyes narrowing just enough to tell me he was still processing. Detection dogs don't get distracted by chandeliers and curated landscaping. They don't care about image. They care about anomalies, scent, pattern, trace elements where trace elements shouldn't be. And whatever he was getting from that door, it mattered enough that he couldn't let it go. I crossed into the kitchen and picked up a napkin I didn't need. From there, I had a cleaner angle down the hallway. The door sat recessed into the wall, painted the same muted cream as everything around it, almost invisible if you weren't looking for it. There was no decorative molding around the frame, no spotlight above it, no attempt to make it belong. It looked like someone had tried to hide it by refusing to acknowledge it existed. That usually works on guests. It doesn't work on people trained to notice what doesn't fit. Still doing that thing where you disappear into corners. Chelsea's voice came from behind me, smooth and close. I turned just enough to face her. She had handed Titan's leash off to Bradley for the moment, probably so she could hold a martini glass with both hands and look effortless. Her dress was the kind of cream silk that only looked simple because it was expensive. Her makeup was perfect. Her smile was not. "I'm standing in a kitchen," I said, not exactly covert. She gave a short laugh and leaned one shoulder against the marble island like we were having a sisterly moment. "You know," she said, "for someone who claims not to care, you've been staring at him a lot." I looked past her. Titan had already noticed she'd walked away. Not because he cared, because the leash had changed hands. He adjusted once, then looked right past Bradley's leg and down the hall again. "I'm making sure he's comfortable," I said. Chelsea's eyes narrowed very slightly. "He looks comfortable to me." "No," I said, "he looks alert." She took a sip from her glass and set it down with exaggerated calm. "You always did this." "Did what?" "Talk like everyone else is stupid." I almost smiled. That line was old, familiar. Chelsea used it whenever she sensed she was outside her depth but didn't want to admit it. Growing up, it had been math homework, college applications, car repairs, anything I understood that she didn't. She treated competence like arrogance if it wasn't hers. "I didn't say anyone was stupid," I said. "You didn't have to." She tipped her chin, slightly studying me. "You know Dad was worried about you coming tonight." There it was. Not direct enough to challenge, just enough to poison the air. I didn't respond, so she continued. "He said big crowds haven't exactly been your thing since—" She let the sentence trail off soft enough to imply concern, loud enough to be heard by the two guests near the pantry. "Since deployment. Since the thing people like Chelsea referenced without understanding because trauma sounded useful when she needed a social advantage." I held her gaze. "Interesting. What is?" "That you think pretending to care makes that less ugly." Her expression changed for a second. Not anger, not yet. Something tighter. Something closer to embarrassment, because deep down she knew exactly what she was doing. Then it passed. "You're being dramatic," she said lightly. "I'm just saying maybe this isn't the best environment for you to be handling a working dog." There was that phrase again. Working dog. She didn't even realize she was getting warmer. "Who told you that?" I asked. She tilted her head. "Told me what?" "That phrase." A pause. Half a beat too long. Then she smiled. "Oh, please. You act like everything about you is classified." "Not everything I thought, just the parts you can't afford to misunderstand." Bradley walked in then, leash in hand, already irritated. "He keeps pulling toward that hall," he muttered. "What is his problem?" Titan was not pulling. He was resisting redirection. Important distinction. Chelsea took the leash back from him with a little sigh, embarrassed now that the dog wasn't performing properly in front of guests. She gave the leather a sharper tug than before. Heel. Titan didn't move. Not one step. He stayed exactly where he was, eyes on the basement door muscles still beneath his coat like a drawn cable. Bradley looked at me. "You train him to ignore women or something." I turned slowly. "No," I said. "I trained him to ignore nonsense." That landed harder than I intended, or maybe exactly as hard as it should have. Bradley's jaw tightened. Chelsea's nostrils flared once. Neither of them spoke right away. My father's voice entered before they could recover. "That's enough." He didn't raise it. He never had to. Gregory stepped into the kitchen in pressed slacks and a dark blazer, bourbon still in hand posture, as upright as if someone might inspect him at any moment. Retirement hadn't softened him. It had only removed the parts of him that had to pretend. The guests nearby quieted without meaning to. He looked at Chelsea first, then Bradley, then finally me. "This evening is not about old resentments," he said. "No, it was about live ones." I folded the napkin once and set it down. Then maybe people should stop creating new ones. His expression cooled. "You came into your sister's home," he said, "and instead of behaving like family, you've spent the night observing everyone like a hostile witness." Chelsea gave a small, wounded laugh under her breath, exactly on cue. I looked at him, really looked. He always did this part so cleanly, frame the situation as unity, recast control as order, make obedience sound like maturity. Family, I said, doesn't usually start with theft. Bradley shifted instantly. "Oh, for God's sake, it's a dog." Titan's ears twitched again at the change in tone, but his attention didn't leave the hall. My father stepped closer. "He's being properly housed here," Gregory said. "Safer, more useful." Useful. That word didn't surprise me. It fit him too well. "For who?" I asked. "For people who understand security," Bradley snapped. I let that sit. Then I looked down the hallway again. Titan did the same thing at the exact same moment. And there it was, small, precise, impossible to ignore now. The first crack. He wasn't guarding the house. He was indicating something inside it. I didn't stay for dessert. Chelsea made a point of announcing it, something about me needing air delivered, with a smile that suggested concern to anyone who didn't know her well enough to hear the edge. A few guests glanced my way. Bradley didn't. My father watched me leave like he was taking note of a variable he'd already decided didn't matter. Titan didn't follow me. He stayed exactly where he was supposed to be. That was the only part that mattered. Outside, the night air felt cleaner than anything inside that house. Cooler, sharper, real. I walked past the line of parked cars without looking back, unlocked mine, and got in without rushing. The interior light flicked on, then off. The quiet settled. No adrenaline, no anger. Just alignment. I started the engine, let it idle, and pulled my laptop from the passenger seat. The screen lit up the space in a soft blue glow. For a second, nothing moved. Then I tapped a key, entered a sequence from muscle memory, and the system came online. Secure channel, encrypted access. No noise, no drama. Just data. The map loaded, first satellite overlay, high resolution, stitched in layers most people never see. A single red point pulsed at the center of the screen, steady and precise, like a heartbeat you could measure if you knew how to read it. Titan. I leaned back, one elbow on the console, eyes fixed on that dot. "Show me," I said under my breath. Telemetry populated along the side panel in clean columns: heart rate, respiration, body temperature, movement vectors. All within expected ranges, controlled, focused, not a hint of panic. Good. Then I expanded the behavior log. Timestamps aligned with what I'd seen. Repeated orientation toward a fixed coordinate, duration increasing with each cycle, minor resistance when redirected, no engagement with external stimuli unless it intersected that line. Not random. Not curiosity. Indication. I zoomed in. The map transitioned smoothly from neighborhood to property, from property to structure. Chelsea's house came into full detail, glass stone symmetry designed for cameras. The backyard I'd just left glowed under string lights. The interior layout unfolded in layers as I adjusted the settings. Living room, kitchen, hallway. And then lower level. I isolated the basement footprint. Larger than it should have been based on public records. Reinforced perimeter. Single access point. The door. I tapped the coordinates. The red dot snapped directly over it. Dead center. Of course, I murmured. I pulled up Titan's training profile, scrolling through deployment logs and certification data, explosives detection, narcotics, currency trace, residual chemical signatures tied to manufacturing processes most people only read about in reports they don't understand. High accuracy, low false positive rate. He didn't guess. He confirmed. I sat there for a few seconds, letting that settle into something usable. Then I shifted to Bradley. Name, business filings, property acquisitions. A pattern started to form almost immediately. Rapid growth over the last 18 months. Investments that didn't align cleanly with declared income. Renovation permits filed 6 months ago for structural improvements. No detailed disclosures. Convenient. I opened another panel and cross-referenced supply chain reports flagged in internal systems. Nothing that would trigger an automatic investigation, but enough anomalies clustered around companies Bradley had touched to raise questions. Questions most people wouldn't know to ask. I looked back at the map. The red dot pulsed again, steady. Then it spiked. Not dramatically, not enough for a civilian to notice. Enough for me. Heart rate elevated 140, then stabilizing. I leaned forward. "Talk to me," I said quietly. The behavioral overlay shifted. Alert mode active. That didn't happen because of a loud noise. It didn't happen because someone tugged the leash too hard or raised their voice. Titan had been through environments that would break most people without flinching. Alert mode meant one thing. He had confirmed a target. I exhaled slowly, setting the laptop on the center console so I could see everything at once. Okay, I said. Now we're not guessing. I pulled up the environmental correlation chart, matching his current response pattern against training scenarios. Explosives possible. Narcotics possible. Large quantities of currency highly likely. That last one made me pause. Not because it was surprising. Because it fit. I zoomed further into the basement layout, isolating the exact position of the dot. Not near the door, not along a wall. Centered. Whatever was down there, it wasn't small. It wasn't something you tucked into a corner and forgot about. It was stored. Deliberately. I leaned back again, letting the pieces align without forcing them. Chelsea dragging Titan around the house, trying to make him perform. Titan ignoring her, returning to the same point. Bradley irritated, not curious. The reinforced basement. The undisclosed renovations. The money that didn't quite add up. My jaw tightened just enough to register the shift. You didn't need a guard dog, I said quietly, looking at the screen. You needed a sensor. I opened a secure note and started logging. Time, location, behavioral markers, environmental triggers. No assumptions. Just facts. That's how cases are built. Titan's vitals stabilized again, settling into a steady rhythm that told me everything I needed to know. He had found something, and now he was holding. Waiting. Exactly as trained. I checked the time. Late enough that most of the neighborhood had gone quiet. Lights dimmed, movement minimal. Inside the house, the party would still be going music conversation, Chelsea smiling through whatever cracks were starting to show. They would think this was contained. A family disagreement. A dog. They always thought that. I closed the Bradley file and opened a different channel, restricted internal, not something you accessed unless you were prepared to follow through. My cursor hovered for a second. Not hesitation. Timing. There's a difference between reacting and deciding. Reacting is fast, emotional, predictable. Deciding is deliberate. Final. I thought about my father standing in that kitchen talking about proper use. About Chelsea calling Titan defective because he wouldn't perform for her guests. About Bradley asking if he was trained like it was a feature you could toggle on and off. They had no idea what they were standing next to. No idea what they'd taken. No idea what they'd just exposed. I typed a single line into the log. Potential illegal storage, confirmation pending, asset in position. Then I saved it. Not submitted. Not yet. Observation first, confirmation second, action third. Always in that order. The red dot blinked again, steady as ever. I reached over, shut the laptop halfway, leaving the system in standby. Not off, never off. Just watching. I stepped out of the car, closed the door softly, and took one last look at the house. From the outside, it was perfect. Clean lines, soft lighting, expensive silence. From the inside, it was something else entirely. You really walked into this one, I said under my breath. Not to them. To the situation. Because this was the part people never saw coming. They thought they had taken something from me. What they had actually done was move a trained federal asset directly into the center of whatever they were hiding. I got back into the car, put it in drive, and pulled away from the curb without looking back. No urgency. No hesitation. Because the next move wasn't mine. It was theirs. And I already knew exactly where it would lead. 2 nights later, Chelsea hosted another event. Bigger, louder, more deliberate. Not a backyard gathering this time, a formal charity gala at a private military venue just outside the city. The kind of place where rank still meant something, where uniforms weren't costumes, and where people paid attention to details whether they admitted it or not. It was a calculated move. After the tension at her house, she needed a reset, a stage where she controlled the narrative again, where she could present the same image, polished, elevated, untouchable, and erase any doubt that might have slipped through the cracks. And of course, she brought Titan. I arrived late on purpose. The hall was already full when I stepped inside. Crystal chandeliers cast clean white light over polished floors and dark suits. Conversations layered over each other in controlled tones, measured, practiced, the kind of noise that comes from people used to being listened to. Chelsea stood near the center of it all. Exactly where she wanted to be. Her dress this time was darker midnight blue, structured sharp. Bradley stood beside her, one hand casually resting in his pocket, the other holding a glass he hadn't touched, and at her side, framed perfectly for anyone looking her way, Titan. The leash she'd chosen tonight was thinner, decorative, almost jewelry. A mistake. From a distance, it worked. He looked exactly like what she wanted, a disciplined, expensive, intimidating presence. Guests approached, commented, admired. She laughed, nodded, accepted it all like it belonged to her. But up close, nothing about him matched the story she was telling. His posture was wrong for a pet, too precise, too efficient. His eyes didn't wander, didn't soften, didn't engage. He was scanning. Chelsea didn't notice. She never did. Security upgrade, she was saying as I approached within earshot, her voice light, confident. We figured it was time. A man in a dress uniform studied Titan more carefully than the others. That's not just a guard dog, he said almost to himself. Chelsea smiled. He's still adjusting, she replied. A little stubborn, but we'll fix that. You don't fix training like his. You either understand it, or it exposes you. I stopped about 15 feet away. Far enough to avoid triggering anything prematurely, close enough to matter. Titan saw me instantly. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden movement. Just a shift, subtle, precise, unmistakable if you knew what to look for. His focus snapped into alignment, locking onto me like a compass finding north. Chelsea felt it before she understood it. Her hand tightened on the leash. She glanced down confused, then followed his line of sight. Her eyes landed on me, and everything changed. Not slowly, not gracefully, immediately. Oh my God, she said loud enough to cut through the surrounding conversations. There she is. Heads turned. Of course they did. That's my sister. She continued, stepping slightly forward, placing herself between me and the nearest group like she was managing a situation. She's been trying to take my dog all week. The words landed exactly how she intended, simple, clean, believable to anyone who didn't have context. She's not stable, Chelsea added, lowering her voice just enough to sound concerned. It's been rough since her last deployment. There it was again. The same angle, the same narrative. Different room. Same mistake. Bradley stepped forward immediately, positioning himself between us. You need to leave, he said under his breath, voice tight. Right now. I didn't look at him. Didn't acknowledge him. He wasn't relevant. If you don't walk out, he continued louder, now I'll have military police escort you out of here. A few people stepped back slightly, sensing the shift. They expected an argument. A scene. Something messy. I didn't give them that. I took one more step forward and stopped. 10 feet. Perfect distance. No tension in my shoulders, no change in my breathing. Just position. Chelsea's grip on the leash tightened again. Too tight this time. Her knuckles whitened. She pulled slightly, trying to reassert control. Titan didn't move. His entire focus stayed locked on me. Waiting. The room quieted. Not completely. Just enough. I took a slow breath in. Then I spoke. Titan. One word. Clear, controlled, not loud. The kind of command that doesn't belong in a room like this. A fraction of a second passed. Then the second command followed. Pass off, protect. Bradley opened his mouth. He didn't get a word out. The sound that came from Titan wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Low, deep, controlled. A growl that carried weight. Real weight. Chelsea's hand jerked instinctively, pulling the leash back. Too late. The leather snapped taut, then slack. Titan moved. Not wild, not chaotic. Clean. Precise. He crossed the distance in a single controlled burst and stopped directly in front of me, placing his body between me and them. Not touching me, not leaning. Blocking. That's what protect looks like. His posture shifted completely, muscles engaged, head low, eyes locked forward. On Chelsea. On Bradley. The growl deepened. Chelsea screamed. Not the kind of scream you rehearse. The real kind. She stumbled backward, heels slipping against the polished floor, arms flailing for balance that wasn't there. She hit the ground hard, the leash still wrapped loosely around her wrist. Bradley froze. Mid-step. Mid-thought. This wasn't a situation he could talk his way out of. "Control your dog," he snapped, but his voice cracked halfway through. I didn't move, didn't respond. Because Titan wasn't out of control. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. "Shoot it!" Gregory's voice cut through the room, sharp, authoritative, automatic. "That animal is dangerous. Shoot it." The word echoed. For a split second, no one moved. Then boots hit the floor. Fast, coordinated. Military police moved in from both sides of the hall, weapons raised, formation tight. Chelsea looked up from the floor, relief flashing across her face. This was her version of reality. Authority shows up. Authority fixes things. She clutched the loose end of the leash like it still meant something. "Do something," she cried. "That thing attacked me." Titan didn't even glance at her. The MP unit closed in. 1 step, 2, 3. Then they stopped. Not because of Titan. Because of me. The officer in front lowered his weapon first. He looked at Titan. Then at me. Then he straightened. His hand came up in a clean, precise salute. "Area secured, Agent." Silence. Not the quiet from before. Something heavier. Confusion rippled through the room like a delayed reaction. Gregory blinked once as if he'd misheard. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I said shoot the dog." No one moved. No one even looked at him. The rest of the unit followed the officer's lead, lowering their weapons in unison, not relaxed, just redirected. A figure stepped forward through the crowd, then slow, deliberate, the kind of presence that shifts a room without raising a voice. The base commander. Full uniform, decorations that actually meant something. He stopped a few feet from Gregory. "Repeat that," he said. Gregory turned toward him, relief flashing briefly. "Order your men to detain her," he said quickly. "She's out of control, and that dog." The commander raised one hand. Gregory stopped talking. Not because he wanted to. Because he understood the signal. "You're asking me," the commander said, voice even to arrest a federal agent in the middle of an active operation, so you can protect 2 civilians who just interfered with a classified asset. Silence. Chelsea shook her head weakly from the floor. "It's just a dog," she whispered. "No," I said. Every eye shifted back to me. "It's not." Bradley's phone buzzed. Once. Then again. Then again. He pulled it out, irritation already on his face. Then it changed. The color drained so fast it looked like someone had flipped a switch. The siren started outside. Faint at first. Then unmistakable. I took 1 step forward. Titan adjusted with me still between us. "Do you want to know why he wouldn't stop focusing on your basement door?" I asked. No one interrupted. "He's not guarding anything," I continued. "He's detecting." Bradley's head snapped up. Too late. Explosives, narcotics, large-scale currency, I said each word landing clean, and when he finds something, he holds. The main display at the front of the hall flickered to life. Live feed. Black uniforms, tactical movement. Bradley's house. The basement door. A breach. Light flooded the space. Then the camera settled. Stacks. Neat, organized. Bundled. Cash. A lot of it. Someone in the room whispered Jesus. The feed continued, agents moving deeper, opening cases, scanning documents. "Those aren't mine," Bradley said quickly. No one responded. Because the evidence was already speaking. He looked around, searching for an exit. He found one. A side door. Unlocked. Unwatched. For a second. He turned. Ran. Fast. 1 word. That was all it took. Titan moved. A straight line. No hesitation. Impact. Bradley hit the floor, hard air knocked out of him in a single controlled takedown. Titan shifted instantly, pinning him face down, jaws inches from his throat. Not biting. Not tearing. Just there. A reminder. "Get it off me," Bradley choked. I stepped forward. Out. Titan released immediately, stepping back to my side as if nothing had happened. 2 MPs moved in, securing Bradley with clean, efficient precision. Cuffs clicked. Final. The red and blue lights washed across the hall as they dragged him out. And for the first time all night, no one said a word. The doors closed behind Bradley and the sound didn't echo. It settled. That was the difference. Echoes belonged to noise. This wasn't noise anymore, this was weight. The room didn't rush back to normal. No one picked up a conversation mid-sentence. No one reached for a drink like nothing had happened. The silence stayed where it was stretched across the floor like something solid, something people had to step around now. Chelsea was still on the ground. Not in the dramatic way she'd fallen heels, slipping arms flailing, but in the aftermath. The part no one performs. Her hands rested flat against the marble fingers spread like she needed the contact to convince herself she was still there. Her breathing had slowed. Not steady. Just slower. I didn't move toward her. I didn't need to. Titan sat beside me close enough that I could feel the heat from his body. Calm, centered, no leftover tension, no confusion. That's what control looks like when it's real. It doesn't spike, it doesn't linger. It executes, then resets. Across the room, people started shifting. Not away from the scene. Toward something else. Toward understanding. They weren't watching Chelsea anymore, or the door Bradley had been dragged through. They were watching me. Not curiosity. Recognition. Gregory felt it before he accepted it. He stood where he was for a moment, shoulders still squared, posture still intact. Years of habit don't disappear in a single night. But the structure behind it, the assumption that people would listen, that his voice would carry, had already started to fracture. He took a step forward. Then another. Slower than before. Measured. Not commanding. Approaching. He stopped a few feet in front of me, close enough that he didn't have to raise his voice. "This doesn't have to go any further," he said. "Not an order. A negotiation." I said nothing. He swallowed once, adjusting something in his tone that I'd never heard him adjust before. "I can fix this," he continued. "There are people contacts. This situation can be contained." Contained. Like it was a spill, like it hadn't already moved beyond anything he could reach. I looked at him. Really looked this time. For the first time all night, he didn't look like a general. He looked like a man who had just realized his authority had a boundary. "No," I said. One word. Flat. Phenol. His jaw tightened, but he didn't push through it. He couldn't. Not here. Not now. "You're making a mistake," he said instead, quieter. "No," I repeated. "You did." Behind him, Chelsea shifted. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't controlled. She pushed herself up onto her knees, one hand sliding across the floor until it caught the fabric of my pant leg. Her grip tightened. Not aggressively. Desperately. "Please," she said. The word came out broken, like she wasn't used to saying it without an audience. I didn't know she added quickly, the words tumbling over each other. I swear I didn't know what he was doing. I believed her. That was the problem. Chelsea didn't plan things like this. She didn't build systems. She stepped into them, claimed what she could see, ignored what she couldn't. That had always been her pattern. I thought it was just... She stopped searching for something she could still hold on to, a dog. There it was. The line she should have understood from the beginning. I looked down at her. Mascara smudged, hair out of place, no performance left. Real. But reality doesn't erase consequence. I was jealous, she said the words quieter now, more controlled, like she was finally saying something true instead of something useful. "You always had something I didn't." She let out a breath that didn't quite become a laugh. "I just wanted..." She stopped again. "Wanted what?" "Status. Control. Respect. None of those come from taking something you don't understand." "We're sisters," she said, finally tightening her grip slightly. "That has to mean something." I let the silence sit. Not to punish her. To make sure she heard what came next. Titan shifted once beside me, adjusting his position without breaking alignment. Always aware. Always ready. Not reacting. Waiting. "You took Titan," I said, my voice calm, steady, "because you thought I was weak." Chelsea shook her head immediately. "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." She stopped. "Because we both knew it was true." "And you thought he was something you could show off," I continued. "Something you could control." Her grip loosened. "Not by choice. By realization." "He's not," I said. I paused just long enough for it to land. "He's a soldier." No one in the room moved. No one spoke. "And I'm his handler," I added, his command. I lifted my gaze to Gregory, then back to her. The military doesn't tolerate interference with its assets, I said, and I don't tolerate betrayal. No anger. No raised voice. Just fact. Chelsea's hand slipped away from my leg. Not pushed. Released. Gregory didn't speak again. He didn't argue, didn't threaten, didn't reach for another angle, because for the first time there wasn't one. I gave Titan a light tap on the shoulder. Let's go. He stood immediately, stepping into position at my side, perfectly aligned, as if the last hour had been nothing more than a routine adjustment. I turned. Didn't wait. Didn't look back. And the room did something I didn't ask it to do. It moved. People stepped aside, creating a clear path to the exit without being told, not out of fear, out of understanding, because they had just seen the difference between control and performance, between ownership and authority, between family and behavior. The doors opened as I approached. Cool night air met me on the other side, sharp and clean. I stepped through. Titan moved with me, silent, precise, exactly where he was supposed to be. Behind us, there was no shouting, no one calling my name, no last attempt to rewrite what had just happened. Just silence. The kind that stays. I walked across the lot without rushing the rhythm of my steps, steady, grounded. Titan matched it without a command, adjusting when I adjusted, stopping when I stopped. That's what loyalty looks like. Not emotional. Structural. I reached my car, unlocked it, and paused for a second before getting in. Not thinking. Not replaying. Just still. Because for the first time in a long time there was nothing left to figure out. I knew exactly where I stood. And more importantly, where I didn't. I didn't lose a family tonight, I said quietly, more to the idea than to the moment. Titan settled beside me, calm, present, exactly where he belonged. I lost the illusion that I ever had one. I started the engine. The headlights cut through the dark road ahead, clean and direct. No noise. No hesitation. Just forward. If you've ever had someone take something from you thinking they owned it just because they held it for a moment, I want you to think about that. About what real ownership actually means. About what loyalty actually looks like. And about the difference between people who stand beside you and people who stand on you. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever had to walk away from something that looked like family but wasn't, leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. We share stories like this every day. Stories about truth, about boundaries, about what happens when people underestimate the quiet ones. So subscribe, stay with us, and let's keep going.